Please be seated. If you look at Trinity's Facebook page today, if you have looked or if you still look this evening, you'll see several things. You'll see an invitation to participate in the Epiphany Good Book Club, which started today. You'll see other pictures and things like that. And you'll also see an Epiphany cartoon. The cartoon shows the Holy Family. So that's Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus, and the baby's in the manger. They're flanked by an ox and a donkey. A light shines all around them. So far, that's normal, even for a cartoon. That's how we see the Holy Family at Christmas time, and today is the 12th day of Christmas. As tradition demands, the two human adults and the two animals seem to be focused on the baby in the manger. But that's only because that's what we expect to see. They're actually looking at an anomaly. Next to that gathered group, still within the circle of light, is an electronic screen on a pole with a sign on it that says, "Track your delivery." There's a list of the delivery progress, the method of the progress of the delivery method. The first thing says, "Field and fountain," check. "Moor and mountain," check. "Following yonder star," check. The last entry, unchecked, is "expected shortly." And since today is 12th night, since it is the Feast of the Epiphany, that would be checked too, also, because the delivery of the gifts of the Magi is taking place tonight. It's the last of the 12 days of Christmas in the Western Church calendar, and tradition has it that that's when we recognize the Magi's having appeared. This story is really an amazing story. It doesn't need a lot of embellishment, although we've given it lots of embellishment. But think about it. In this story, nobody except the Magi and Herod, nobody else says anything at all. Mary is noted as a person being there, but she doesn't have a speaking part. We assume Joseph is there, but if you're reading the passage, it's not clear that he is. He might be out working. It's not clear. And the baby Jesus just lies there being a baby. No miraculous behavior on the part of this miraculous baby. He doesn't need any enhancement. And as far as we know, he just watches the Magi and sees the gifts. So the major actors are the Magi themselves, and Herod, and the star. And the star, of course, doesn't have a speaking part either. Now the Magi, there are lots of different translations or interpretations of the Magi, but we assume that they are astrologers. They may be Zoroastrian priests. Later in the Gospels or the New Testament or in other writings, you see Magi referring to magicians, but it seems that they're astrologers and even perhaps astronomers because they get there by following that star. We also can assume that it took about 2 years to get there because they came from the far east, from far away. So Jesus is not any longer a baby in a manger, but he's a toddler. And one of the other reasons we assume that he might very well be a toddler is that when the Magi go to see Herod, and that's another thing about this story, is you've got a real contrast between the Magi's excitement and Herod's anger. So when they go to see Herod, they say, they're visiting, they go see the king, and they say, where's this child supposed to be born? The king of the Jews. And Herod's like, I'm the king, who are you people? And who's this baby? And he's immediately threatened. But he then goes to his own advisors and he says, where's the Messiah supposed to be born? And they tell him in Bethlehem of Judea. And of course, Bethlehem is not very far from where Herod is. So he sends the Magi to Bethlehem and he says, go find this kid, and then I'm going to come and worship him. We know that's not what Herod plans to do. He is enamored enough of himself and fond enough of what power he has that what he's going to do is kill the Messiah if he can. Kill a toddler. And then he orders, which is not in this part of the story, but he orders the killing of all the children 2 and under. Because he asks them when they saw the star first, and essentially he finds out how long it took them to get there. So Herod is the opposite of the Magi. Herod is hostile, angry, and very threatened by Jesus. Now we can contrast the response to Jesus in Luke's gospel. There was no place to stay, there was no room in the inn, but you don't get the hostility that you see in Matthew's gospel. And there are a couple of ways to look at that. For Matthew, the writer himself, because of how he portrays the resistance to Jesus as time goes on, Herod's response to Jesus is a precursor, a foreshadowing of what's going to happen to him in the end. For us, we ought to think about it a little bit differently. We tend to say, those of us who are believers say, oh, I believe in Jesus Christ. But when we're called to do something that means that we need to ask, what would Jesus do? Or we need to trust God, or any of those other things, we're more likely to go, well, I can take care of this. I'll do this myself. As a last resort, I'll consider praying. And if the prayers that if I don't get an answer that I like, then God's being mean to me. So we're a little bit in the shadow side like Herod. We're not threatened in the same way he was, and we're not out to kill the Messiah, but we'd kind of like the Messiah to be the Messiah, and then he could kind of leave the rest of us alone. So we don't have to do anything as a result of our belief in him. This story takes these Gentile, Zoroastrian, these pagan magi, these pagan people, and they know something nobody else knows in around there at that time, and they take the risk to travel as far as it requires them to travel, up to 2 years, to find out what that star means and where is the person the star is guiding them to. And when they get there, they bow down. They get down on their hands and knees. They may even get down flat on the ground in the way that you would when you worship a king. And this baby isn't doing, or this toddler isn't doing anything miraculous, but they know who he is because the star has led them there, and because Herod himself has told them where the Messiah is to be born, the King of the Jews. So they bow down, and that's a symbol of every knee shall bow, every tongue confess, which we just read on Sunday, and we just heard on Sunday in the letter to the Philippians. So the star is there. There are lots of thoughts about that star. There are some astronomers who consider that it was a comet that was around at that time. There are, so the story is full of both supernatural and natural things. And the gifts that the Magi bring, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Toward the end of the service, we're going to be singing We Three Kings of Orient Are, and that's where Moor and Field and Fountain, Moor and Mountain, following yonder star comes from for the tracking the delivery of the gifts. And gold and frankincense and myrrh are defined in that hymn. Gold I bring, born a king on Bethlehem's plain, gold I bring to crown him again. Gold for royalty. Frankincense to offer have I, incense owns a deity nigh. incense, fully human, a king, fully divine incense. And then myrrh I bring, its bitter perfume breathes a life of gathering gloom, sorrowing, sighing, breathing, bleeding, dying, sealed in the stone cold tomb. Myrrh was one of the spices that was used in wrapping a body for burial. So what Matthew does with this story, and what scholars and people have done in the last 2,000 years, is take those gifts and look at them as royal gifts for a royal baby, and also full of the symbols of the powers surrounding and encircling the shadows around Jesus are right there from the beginning, and that the contrast between the Gentiles' offering and the Jewish leader king's response is a contrast that is set up in all of us. You know, do I believe in this person or not? And if I believe in this person, what does that mean? And how am I going to live my life? So those Gentiles, those magi, give him the gifts, and then being warned in a dream, and Matthew has got, Joseph is warned, he's going to be warned in a dream shortly, and he was warned in a dream or a vision to begin with that Mary was going to have a baby, and he needed not to fear taking her for his wife. So warned in a dream, they go home by another way. And that's something else we have looked at and seen and thought about over the last 2,000 years, that their encounter with Jesus Christ changed them, and they went home by another way. Their journey was different because they'd met him. The dream told them to go home by another way, not to go back to Herod, and their experience gave them a different purpose and a different way of being. That star, a comet, a sign, whatever it is, it's a silent character in both Matthew and in Luke. And stars are symbols of divinity. The heavens are enormous. We still haven't seen the ends of them, and we're sending, cameras and spacecraft to find where the expanding universe is going. That's one way of looking at a star. Those are ways of looking at a star. Other people think of stars as places where the light shines through, the light of the heavenly realms. This whole story is full of light and shadows and hope, and the fear that responds to hope, the fear that tries to overcome hope, and the joy that is possible for all of us. So think about this story and think about that cartoon. Track the delivery and think about what it means to you. Amen.